Here we go. So yesterday we began discussing the various types of watchers, even though, of course, this discussion I think will primarily take place in Masechet Bava Metzia. Where sort of we touched on the issue of watchers. Yeah, we're going to have Rashi. I think we'll have a little Tosfos. We're going to have Rav Yosef and Abaye. And Rabbah.
Berman?
No Bermans, but we'll see who we got. Okay, so in any event, yesterday we began discussing the various types of watchers in connection with our Mishnah's statement that when one gives an animal over to a shepherd, the shepherd stands in his place. And we explained the Gemara already told us that if an owner, hold on just a second. Yeah, we're going to talk about goat. Sheep. But the owner talked about here we are. We're going to talk about it right now. So the Gemara had already told us that if an owner of an animal, we'll call it a sheep, gives that sheep over to a shepherd, we've already been told that the owner is going to be out of the picture. If he gives it over to any kind of watcher, a unpaid watcher, a paid watcher, a borrower, a renter, any of those, that person is not going to be responsible for any damage done by that animal while under the supervision of the person who's watching it. Again, whatever kind of watcher it is, paid, unpaid, a borrower, or renter. Those are the four main categories. And so, and we said, therefore, what is our Mishnah talking about when it says that you give it to a shepherd? So it means even one of the watchers can exempt themselves from liability. Now, there are two versions of that exemption from liability. There's the exemption from liability, the plain understanding, and that would be that whoever you are, you can, they can give it over. But we also saw that there was a teaching, the teaching of whose teaching was it? This was the teaching of Rava, who said that at the end of the day yesterday, that if a watcher passes it along to another person, the first watcher is still responsible because they never got permission. And so as a result, you can't, if Stan asks me to watch something and I then give it to Mark for watch, Stan still has a claim against me. That's Rava's point. And so as a result, Rava recharacterizes our Mishnah to say it's not generally true that a watcher can give it on, but if Mark is my deputy, if Mark is under my tutelage and is learning to be a shepherd under my supervision, and I hand it over to Mark, that you expect me to be able to do that. You expect me to be able to convey it as part of my education of him. And it won't be my responsibility in that situation. Mark will stand in for my stead. So if that were to happen, you would have to go to Mark. You would not be able to go to me. So that got us into this whole discussion of watchers. Now, having talked about watchers, we're going to now go on an aside. And again, this really doesn't belong here. And the Rishonim talk about, well, why was it brought here? But the bottom line is that now we're going to talk about what happens if you find something in the street. We know that there's an obligation when you find something in the street to return it to the owner. Now, sometimes, and I know that, Mark, you found a $20 bill once, sometimes you don't know whose it is, and there's no way that anybody can identify it.
345.
Really? You found $345? Wow, that's a lot. So anyway.
The Kingsbush.
Oh, okay. Well, you have to be careful with that. So
we went home with that.
All right. Well, that's probably a good idea. So the point is that if you find something, you need to watch it in order to return it. Now, so if for example, you find something with somebody's name on it, you should return it to that person. You got to find the person. But the bottom line is what kind of watcher, what kind of responsibility do you have during the time that you're watching it? And the rubber meets the road with respect to two things. If it gets stolen from you and if you lose it. if you're considered like an unpaid watcher and you didn't have any sort of extraordinarily, you weren't irresponsible, well, then if it gets stolen or you lose it, then you're not going to be liable for it. But if you're considered like a paid watcher, well, then you're going to be more responsible and you are going to be liable in those situations. So let's take a look, and we're going to see that debate. And that debate is going to take us through most of today. So Itmar, Shomer, the person who's watching a lost object, Rabba Amar Kashomer Chinam Dummy. Rabba says he's like an unpaid watcher. Rav Yosef Amar Kashomer Sachar Dummy. And Rav Yosef says, no, he's like a paid watcher. Rabba Amar Kashomer Chinam Dummy. So Rabba explains, I think he's like an unpaid watcher because my hana kamatile. What kind of benefit does he get? Rav Yosef Amar Kashomer Sachar Dummy. He's like a paid watcher. Why? Because you don't have to give poor people a piece of bread. So Havi Kashomer Sachar. So you're like a paid watcher because there is some benefit to you. And take a look at Rashi, last Rashi on Nun Vav Amabet. And I apologize for not explicitly saying we are starting 1, 2, 3, 6 lines up in the wide lines from the bottom of Nun Vav Amabet. And we also, and so we're now up to we were now two. So the third to last line on in the Gemara, we're up to Ika de Mefarish. So, but we're going to jump into Rashi for a moment, and the last Rashi, 4 lines up, Delo boy lamesa riftalania, daha osik b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah, because we have a general concept in the Torah that when you are involved in one mitzvah, you're exempt from another mitzvah. Because the concept is that when you're going in your way, so then you are obligated in saying Shema, but nafgalan b'Masechet Sukkah. But and we learn in Masechet Sukkah that implies. But if you're doing in the middle of doing a mitzvah, well, then you are exempt from saying Shema. And of course, actually, this could be even considered like a Daf Yomi coincidence, because in last week's parsha, when Yosef and his father met each other, it says that Yosef cried on his father's shoulders, but it doesn't say his father cried on his shoulders. And the Midrash says it was because his father was davening Kriya Shema. Well, what about Yosef? Wasn't he responsible davening Kriya Shema? And so some people say that it was because he was involved in the mitzvah of taking care of his father. So as a result, he was osik b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah. So that is so. But the bottom line is that we say that general concept. And so if you are involved, now the question is what level of involvement do you need? And there's a what?
Life or death.
Well, no. What level of involvement do you have to have in a mitzvah in order for you to be exempt from another mitzvah? So the Tosos explains that in general you need to be involved in a mitzvah in a way that essentially prevents you from doing another mitzvah, and that's how we generally apply the principle. There are others who say that basically the Ramban, I think it is, that says basically if you're involved in the mitzvah and you're working on it right then you would be exempt, even if essentially you could do both at the same time. But the bottom line is that that's the basis for saying that the person is considered like a paid watcher, because he's ozik b'mitzvah and therefore pater from doing something else. And the thing that he's pater from is essentially something that enables him to keep more money in his pocket. And so as a result, that's why he's considered a paid watcher.
An interesting situation, depending whether you think it is better to have do a voluntary mitzvah or mandatory mitzvah, could depend with the last approach would determine whether you should stop the first mitzvah and do the second mitzvah, or wait until you're done with the first mitzvah.
Well, first of all, that's an interesting point that you raise. That sometimes the question is do you ever pause doing a mitzvah? Because there's an argument to say that the part of the concept of that osek b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah is that you're not supposed to stop doing a mitzvah. mitzvah. And so the idea is that, whatever mitzvah you're doing, you should finish doing that mitzvah. And indeed, we'll see in a few weeks, but it relates to this week's parsha, the concept of the fact that the person who finishes a mitzvah is often credited with the mitzvah. So Yosef at the end of this week's parsha says that to the Jewish people, you got to take me out of Egypt when you can. And in Sefer Yehoshua, it tells us that the Bnei Yisrael were responsible for burying Yosef. But we all know that who was the one who went looking for Yosef's bones on the way out? It was Moshe. In Parshas B'Shalach, I think it is, we say that Moshe takes Yosef's bones with him, and so as a result, Moshe had done the mitzvah all the way from Egypt to the border where he passes away, and yet the Gemara tells us, Navi tells us that the Bnei Yisrael took care of it, shows that the finishing of the mitzvah is so important. So it highlights the fact that you would want to try and finish the mitzvah if you started it. So that's one explanation of why Rav Yosef would say that he's like a paid watcher. But there's another explanation. And of course, the first explanation is certainly the most famous of the explanations associated with it. But Rav Yosef Amar Kishomer Sachar Dami Kaven Derachmana Shabde Val Korche. That essentially, why does Rav Yosef say he's like a Shomer Sachar, like a paid watcher? He's paid watcher because the Torah obligates him. And if the Torah is obligating the person, presumably it's creating some level of responsibility beyond the very minimal level. So Hilka Chashomer Sachar Dami. And so therefore we're going to consider like a paid watcher. Now we're going to challenge Rav Yosef twice, then we're going to challenge Rabbah twice, and none of the challenges are going to be successful. It does seem, based on the Masoras Hashas, that we do follow the halacha follows Rav Yosef, that we treat the person like a Shomer Sachar, and we treat him like a Shomer Sachar based on the Hana that he has. So that's an important factor. But let's take a look and see what we've got. So we're going to have the following discussion. So we'll skip the Simon, but Isvei, Rav Yosef LaRabba. So Rav Yosef challenges Rabbah. So again, we're going to challenge Rav Yosef is going to have two challenges of Rabbah, and then we're going to challenge Rav Yosef twice as well, once by Rabbah, once from Abaye. So let's take a look. So Esvei Rav Yosef Rabbah. So Rav Yosef challenges Rabbah as we turn to Zayin Amud Aleph. Hechazira lamakom sheyireh yirena. If you take the object, you found a lost item. What should the lost item be, Mark? What should we say that somebody lost that is recognizable? Maybe it's a shirt. We'll say you found a shirt, and you know whose shirt it is, right? You know it's my shirt, and so you say, you know what? It's too much trouble for me to go to David's house. But I know where David sits in shul. And so I'm going to put it in the shul at David's seat. And so that's going to be a place where I'm going to see it. So then you don't need to worry about it. You don't have any further responsibility to deal with it. But nigniva or avda, but if it gets stolen or lost, then you're responsible for it. So 1 second, what do you mean? This is all very confusing. So Rav Yosef explains the brisa and then shows why it's a proof to him. Again, Rav Yosef says that you're a shomer sachar, you're a paid watcher. So my nignava o avda, what does it mean that it was lost or stolen or lost? Lab nignava mebeso but avda mebeso. Doesn't it have to mean that when Mark found my shirt, that he took it home and it was stolen or lost from his home? So low, and as a result, doesn't that mean that Mark is treated like a paid watcher? Because the difference between a paid watcher and an unpaid watcher is that he is whether or not he's liable for a stolen or lost.
But learned that he found the shirt, he took it to your place in the synagogue and left it there.
Correct, but it can't mean, and the Haba mean
excused from his liability.
Correct, exactly. So when we then say that it was stolen or lost, it must be referring back to when before he put the shirt in my place.
Meant that it was stolen, it was taken.
No, you're absolutely right. That's one way to read the brisa, but the Rav Yosef says it can't mean that. So, but Rabbah sends back You know what? It means exactly the way you said it. Lo, mimakom shechazira. When Mark puts it down and it gets stolen, Rabbah says it's stolen from my place in the synagogue. That's where it was stolen from. Oh, but Rav Yosef says back 1 second. How can you say, Rabbah, that we're talking about a situation where it was stolen from my place? The language of the Brisa says that Mark has no further responsibilities to deal with it. So how could he be, if he has no further responsibilities, why would he be liable? So Amar Le, Rabbah explains, we're talking about the following. Mark didn't return it to my place in the morning before davening. He returned it to my place in the afternoon. So when there's a whole yeshiva that's down there. And so as a result, there are lots of people that are going to go through, and I'm not going to see it until the next day.
English about all of that.
All right. So Visarti Katani.
Friday evening.
Yeah, like Friday evening, exactly. The Tarti Katani. And so as a result, the Bryce is teaching us two rules. If Mark returns it in the morning before I get to davening and he returns it to my place, so then he's fine. Then that's okay. He's not going to be liable. And because I'm regular going to go and see it, so as a result, he can rely on it. So therefore, he's got no further obligations. However, if he only returns it in the afternoon when I'm not, it's not so common that I go up and see it in the afternoon. And then and it's lost or stolen or lost from that location. So then Mark will be responsible, not because he's treated like a shomer sachar, but because he's an irresponsible shomer chinam. He's an irresponsible unpaid watcher. So because Mark should know that when does it work to put the stuff at my seat? Only if it's in the morning before I get there, because then he knows that I'm going to get there. But in the afternoon, maybe I'm not going to make it to shul. I don't always make it to this shul for Mincha Marav. So okay, so that was effort number one, and it was unsuccessful. So so now we're going to say again, Rav Yosef is challenging Rabbah's explanation, trying to show that the person is treated like a shomer sachar. Really, and we have another brisa. Really, the person is always going to be liable, and we're understanding that this means for theft or loss until he puts it in my, again, Mark's found my shirt until he puts it into my property. My la'olam, what does it mean, la'olam? Lava filum ibeso, doesn't it mean even from his house? Meaning, just as a paid watcher is responsible if it gets stolen from his house or if it gets lost, so too is a finder will be responsible. Shmami na kishomer sachar dami. Again, don't we see from here that the finder is treated like a shomer sachar? And a Rabbah says, no, it does not mean that, because Amar Le, he says back to him, no modina lach b'valei chayim. That brisa is talking about live animals. And live animals, the keva denakte lahu nigra brisa, that since they take steps outside, by netirusia serika, they require additional watching. And so as a result, if Mark, instead of finding my shirt, he finds my dog, then he knows that he's got to watch it well, because dogs, I don't know, what kind of dog do you like?
King Charles Spaniel.
Okay, that kind of dog. So so as a result, that's why he's going to be liable. So, and the point is, it's not about him being a shomer sachar. He's treated like a shomer chinam, but he's a shomer chinam who has to know the level of responsibility that's associated with watching animals. And when you're watching an animals, they require an additional watching. And again, this is not, as Rashi is going to note, this is not considered like a paid watcher due to the benefit of the mitzvah, but rather because when an animal is stolen or lost, that constitutes negligence. And so as a result, that's why, and even an unpaid watcher is liable for negligence. So, okay, so those were our two efforts for Rav Yosef to try and prove his case. Now we're going to go in the opposite direction. So Esvei Rabba Rav Yosef. So Rabba challenges Rav Yosef. Hashev, we have a brisa that tells us that the fact is when you're a finder, it tells you to return it. But it's going to use a double language, hashev tishivim. So what are we going to learn from that double language? So hashev, the first reference to it, ein li el beveso. That tells you that if Mark needs to return it to me, he's got to put it in my house. It's not sufficient to just leave it, not on my property. He's got to leave it on my property. But legina so luchurbano or luchurvaso minayin. How does he know that if I own a piece of property that's a ruin, that's that is under construction, so to speak, or I have a garden that it's sufficient for Mark to put it into those locations also? Talmud Lomar Tishivim. It's so the double language tells you that it needs to be that even if you put it in my garden or in my ruin, then that's going to be sufficient. So makom doesn't make a difference where you put it, as long as you put it in my possession. It doesn't have to be in my house specifically. So now Rabbah explains his proof, and he says, well, what does it mean in the garden or my ruin? So if we're talking about a place that I'm watching, that is guarded, meaning that is fenced in and only I have access to, and Mark just throws my shirt into those structures. So Hainu Beso, what's the difference between that and my house? It's the same thing. The Gemara, the Brisa wouldn't need to teach it. So Elapshita, it's got to be Gilagina so She'ena Mishtameres Luchova so She'ena Mishtameres. It must be that we're talking about putting it in my property, even property that is not being watched, that anybody can walk into. So Shmamina, Kashomer Chinam Dami. And yet, I am going to that's going to be sufficient. Even if somebody were to steal it from that location, that's going to be sufficient. And not and so as a result, that shows that the person must be like an unpaid watcher, because he's not responsible for theft and loss. So Amar Le, Rabbi Yosef says, no. No, Mark cannot just throw it into my unwatched garden and into my unwatched ruin. If he wants to put it in my yard, he needs to make sure to throw it into my backyard, which is fenced in and is watched and is therefore a guarded structure. And Rabbah, when you tried to make your proof, you argued that it's just like the person's house. Well, I'll tell you why. Hakamashmalan. This is what it's teaching us. No, the additional element that is being taught by telling us that not only can you put it into my house, but you could even put it into my garden or my ruin, my construction site, is that you don't need my knowledge when you return something. Okay? If you find something that belongs to me, it is sufficient for you to just put it, for example, potentially in my mailbox, assuming that the mail is, come already, because that way nobody else is going to be there, especially if you put it in my locked mailbox, because even the mailman doesn't have access to that. So, and to the Rabbi Elazar, and this is all like Rabbi Elazar, to Amar Rabbi Elazar, Hakol Trikan Das Balam. Whenever you return something, if you stole something of mine and you want to return it to me, you got to let me know. You got to give it to me directly. You can't just put it in my yard. But when it comes to you returning something that I lost, the Torah enables you to go to go less out of your way, and all you have to do is put it in my possession, as long as it's in a watched place, as long as it's in a guarded place. And so therefore, if you were to, for example, give it to a doorman of my building, that would be sufficient, because you put it into watched location. You didn't tell me that you gave it to the doorman, but the doorman will eventually tell me that you gave it to him. Because that's why the Torah repeated the term hashev, and it says hashev to shivim, that you should be able to return it even without my knowledge. So bottom line is Rav Yosef has defended this first challenge from Rabbah, and now again Rav Yosef is going to be challenged, this time from Abaye. Amar le Abaye Rav Yosef va'at lo tispara to shomer aveda to shomer chinam dami. Well, 1 second. How could you not say that the watcher of a lost item should be like an unpaid watcher, because Vaha Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan Hatoing Tainus Gana Ba'Beda, when it comes to somebody who claims that a thief stole his object, Mishalem Tashlumi Kefel, the person who made that claim, meaning the unpaid the finder of the lost item, who says it was stolen from me. If it turns out that I lied and actually it was never stolen from me, I found Stan's Rolex watch, and I say, and then you come to me, Stan, and I said, oh, I heard that you found my Rolex watch, and I say, no, I never found that. It was no, I found it, but it was stolen from me. And so, and now witnesses come and say, hey, we saw David wearing that Rolex watch, and so I have to pay you double because I'm a ganav, and a ganav pays double. But the Isal, the Shomer Sachar Havi. But 1 second, there's a problem if, according to Rav Yosef says that I'm supposed to be like a paid watcher. But what did my claim? What was my claim? My claim was that it was stolen from me. But if it was in fact stolen from me, I would be liable to you if I'm a paid watcher. And so as a result, we should never get to the situation of my paying double, because as soon as I admit to you that it was stolen from me, I have to pay you the value of the watch. So there is no possibility of paying double. Do you understand the point? All right, so let's go through it again. The point is, again, according to Rav Yosef, if I find your watch, I'm like a paid watcher. Right. Now I claim, you come to me and I say, I'm sorry, it was stolen from me. Well, if I'm like a paid watcher, I have to pay you for the value of it. But this teaching that Rabbi Chia bar Abba said that I don't pay you the value. It's only when somebody comes and says, "Oh, we found the watch on on my wrist, and it's the watch that Stan lost." Then I swore that I was not that I didn't owe it to you. So then I have to give you double. But if I already gave you single, then you've already been made whole. There is no theft that I performed against you. And so as a result, what's the situation where Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that you have to pay, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that I have to pay double? There is no situation where that could happen. So on my Mishan Tashlumi, so Isaac Adaitak Shomer Sachar Havi, on my Mishan Tashlumi Kefel, Karnabai Shalumi, I already have to pay you the principal. So Amar Le, Rav Yosef explains, Hakabamayaskinam. Here's what we're talking about. Kegon Shatoin Tinus Listim Mizuya. What I say is not that the watch, the Rolex watch was stolen from me. I say that armed bandits took it from me. Now, armed bandits, we're going to let's quickly go through the difference between a ganav and a gazlan. A ganav is somebody who steals something, right in front of you. He just takes it away. I'm sorry. A ganav is somebody who steals something in secrecy, and what it shows is that he's more concerned about what people think of him than what God thinks of him. A gazlan, on the other hand, comes over, takes it away from you and says, tough luck. I'm sorry. I'm just going to take it from you. And so as a result, a gazlan, we don't punish the same way. A gazlan does not need to pay double. Okay. So that's the distinction. So once we say but now that we said that I'm saying that I'm armed bandits, how does that answer the question? Because as Amar Le, Abaye says back to him, Listim Mizuyan Gazlanhu, an armed robber, an armed bandit is a robber. So as a result, how can you, Rav Yosef, say that that's the situation where we say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that I'm supposed to pay double? I'm not going to pay double. The Gazlan situation is not considered a situation of a ganav. So Amar Le, so Rav Yosef said, Shani Omer, I say, listim mezuyan kevan de mitamar meinshe ganavhu, that even armed robbers, because they are going to hide themselves and they're not going to set up shop and just tell tell everybody where they're located. As a result, even a gazlan is considered a ganav with respect to having to pay. Okay, so now we've set up, and that's it. That's the discussion of whether or not the shomer chinam, whether or not, excuse me, the person who finds a lost item is considered a shomer chinam or a shomer sachar. We have tried 2 times in each direction. We've been unsuccessful. As I noted, we're going to paskin that he's like a shomer sachar, but in any event, we're now going to change over to talk about this question of whether armed bandits are considered a ganav or a gazlan. So Esve, so 1 second, you Abaye, you want to say something, Charlie?
No, I was laughing. They're both Elser.
Yes, they are both usher, but there's a very big difference between them because a ganav, if when he gets caught, pays double, and a gazlan, when he gets caught, does not pay double. So there's a very important distinction. So Esve,
single.
yeah, just single, just you just have to pay back the. So Esve, so they challenged Rav Yosef's interpretation, saying that an armed robber is considered a ganav from the following brisa. So this brisa is going to talk about the stringencies that are associated with an unpaid watcher over a paid watcher. Low, so and it's the middle. We're picking up in the middle of the brisa as we turn to Nun Zayin Amabet. So lo im amarta b'shomer chinam shekain mishalom tashlumi kefel tomar b'shomer sachar sheinu mishalom tashlumi kefel. So there is a difference between an unpaid watcher and a paid watcher. And our simple understanding of this brisa is that there is one way in which a unpaid watcher is stricter, is more liable than a paid watcher. And what is that? It is if the person claims that their item was stolen, and then it turns out that and he swears that it was stolen, and then it turns out that he had it, and that he had taken it himself. Because in that situation, if in fact we were dealing with a shomer sachar, a paid watcher, if I say it's stolen, I have to pay you already. And so as a result, I will not have to pay you double. But if I'm a shomer chinam, then I'm going to have to pay you double. That was the case that we just had 2 moments ago. And so the Isalka Daitach, and so now we're going to finish the question. Isalka Daitach, list of Mizuyan Ganavu, if you're going to tell me that an armed robber is considered like a thief. Now, again, an armed robber who goes to a paid watcher, that is considered beyond the paid watcher's control, and it's considered an ones, and the paid watcher also will not be liable. So, but now, if in fact that situation is true, that a paid watcher who says that it was stolen from him by armed bandits is not liable, but it turns out that he's wearing the watch, so he too should have to pay double. So how can you say in this brisa that there's a nature of something that's stricter with respect to a shomer chinam than with respect to a shomer sachar? We just found a situation where nimtza b'shomer sachar mishalom tashlum kefil. We just created a situation where even a shomer sachar, even a paid watcher, will have to pay double when b'toen tainus listim mizuyan, if he claims falsely that it was armed bandits who took it from him. So Rav Yosef is going to clarify the brisa. Amar le, Rav Yosef would say the following: Hachi kamar, you're misunderstanding the brisa. Lo im amarta b'shomer chinam shekain misham tashlum kevel b'chol tanosav. The point is that when it comes to a shomer chinam, he is going to have to pay double in any situation where he claims that it was stolen. Tomar b'shomer sachar she'ena misham tashlum v'kofel ela b'toin tanis listim. But when it comes to a shomer sachar, he is not going to have to pay double in every stolen situation. He's only going to have to pay double if he claims it was stolen. If he no, not just he lied, but he claims it was stolen by armed bandits and he lied. That's the only situation. And so as a result, the brisa is not telling us that there is a way that shomer chinam is uniquely strict, but there is a way that is a shomer chinam is more generally strict. And so that's what it's trying to tell us. So that was effort number one, to try and show that Rav Yossi's interpretation about armed bandits is incorrect. Now we try again to challenge Rav Yossi's interpretation of armed bandits. Esvei mitnishbar omes. If somebody borrows something, that's the context of this brisa that we're now quoting. If he borrows an animal, and the Torah tells us in Shmot Perek Bat Pasuk Yud Gimel, that if in fact something breaks or it dies, ainli ela shvuro mesa. So as a result, I know that you're going to, that if I borrow it, if I borrow your animal and you aren't there with it, because the next pasuk says, I think it's the next pasuk says that if you are, then I'm not going to be liable. But if I borrow your animal and while I'm borrowing it, something bad happens to it, on me, I have to make you whole because I'm a borrower. And so ainli ela shvuro mesa. So from the Torah, I only know if something breaks or if it dies. But how about geneva va'aveda minayin? How do we know that a borrower is also liable if it's stolen or if he loses it? Amarta kal v'chomer. I can tell you we have a kal v'chomer. And what's the kal v'chomer? Uma shomer sakar shepater bo shavuru mesa. That when it comes to a paid watcher is exempt from having to pay if the animal dies or if the animal breaks a limb. But a paid watcher is liable for theft and loss. So Shoel shechaya b'shvuro mesa eino din shechaya b'gneva v'aveda. So when it comes to a borrower who is liable for when it breaks or dies, so then certainly they should be liable for theft and loss. The brisa concludes v'zeu kal v'chomer she'ein alav tshuva. And there is no response to this kal v'chomer. This kal v'chomer is a valid kal v'chomer. So the isach list of mezuyin ganav. But one second, if in fact you were to say that the armed bandits are treated like a thief, amai ein alav tshuva. Why isn't there a response? A response to a kal v'chomer is to show that there's some way in which the weaker item is actually stronger. Because again, a kal v'chomer is that if I can pick up 20 pounds, then then I can pick up 10, right? So the point is, but if we show that that in the situation where we're asking where I pick up 10, that there's something stricter about it because I'm on Jupiter where everything is heavier. Well, then you know what? That's a different situation. There's a status of that kal v'chomer is not a valid kal v'chomer. So, and now what's the situation? Because ikal mifrach, we can refute the kal v'chomer as follows. So again, amai ein alav tshuva, ikal mifrach, umala somer sakar shekain mishalim tashlum kefal betoin tainis listim mezuyan. Because there's a way that the shomer sakar can be liable in a double payment. Because a shomer sakar is liable in a double payment if he claims that armed bandits came and stole it from him. But if a borrower claims that armed bandits came and stole it from him, you know what? He's liable to pay the underlying payment in the first place. He doesn't get out of his liability if armed bandits come. So as a result, that's going to show a stricter way that that shomer sakar, that a paid watcher is stricter than a borrower. So Amar Le, Rav Yosef responds, Kasavar Haitaina, the Tana who taught this brisa thinks the following: Karna below Shvua, that when the borrower has to pay the principal and is not able to swear to escape from it, Adiva Mikafela B'Shvua, that is a better thing. That is a more strict thing. That is a more strict sense of liability than having to pay double if you swear falsely. And so as a result, again, we've tried to challenge it, but we have not been successful. So now the Gemara is going to change over, and it's going to actually try to prove that Rav Yosef is correct, that an armed bandit is considered a ganav. And he's going to ask a question from a brisa, and it's going to end up bringing 3 answers, all of which work. So none of them are going to actually actually undermine our situation. By the way, again, it seems like that armed bandits are in fact treated like a ganav based on the location of the Ein Mishpat, but I have not gone to look and see whether that is in fact the case. Okay, but let's say that we have the following proof that Rav Yosef is in fact correct associated with this. So let's take a look. So hasocher para mechavero v'nignava. If you rent a cow and it gets stolen, Amar hala hareini mishalem ve'eni nishba. And the person says, "Listen, I don't want to make an oath. Oaths are, again, it's important to note this as background. Oaths are very strict, and people who are, try to be as good a person as you can. You want to avoid having to make an oath as much as possible. And so, as a result, the person says, you know what, it was stolen, but I rented it, so I'm not liable for the theft, but I don't want to have to make an oath. I'm just going to give you the money for it. But then it turns out, and now it turns out that the thief was caught. So who gets the double payment? Because again, the thief is liable for a double payment. Well, the person who rented it is going to get paid that double payment because he already paid. If I'm the renter, I already paid you for it. You've already been made whole. So now I'm going to get the double payment. So Svara Karabi Yehuda, the Amar Soker Kenosi Sakar Dami. Well, one second, maybe this brisa is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that a renter is a paid custodian, a paid watcher. And if he's a paid watcher, he's supposed to be liable associated with a ganav, right? A paid watcher is liable for theft. So umidikatani Amar Hareini Mishalim ve'eni nishba, and the person by saying I'm going to pay and not swear, miklal de ibai pater le nafshin b'shvua. That implies he could have sworn and been not liable. So heichidami, what's the situation? Because if in fact I were to just claim an ordinary thief came and took it in the middle of the night, well, I'm liable for that. So as a result, that can't be the situation. So it must be kagon deka tayin tinus listin bezuyan. So it must be that we're talking about where I claimed armed bandits. Vikatani, va'akar nimza gana misham tashlumi kefel soker. And we see that in the end, I made the claim of armed bandits, and then the people were found who did it and need to pay me double. So doesn't that show that armed bandits are considered ganavim who have to pay double? Shema mina list the mizuyan ganavu. That shows that an armed bandit is considered a ganav who needs to pay double. So we're going to have three answers to this response, and with these three answers, we'll conclude. So Amre, mi savrat Rabbi Yehuda, did you want to actually say that maybe it's like Rabbi Yehuda? Well, one second, the Omer Shamar Socher Kenosi Sacher Dami, that he's the one who says that a renter is like a paid watcher. No, Dilma Rabbi Meir Svirale. Maybe this brisa actually goes like Rabbi Meir. Da'amar socher kashomer chinam dami, because a renter is like an unpaid watcher. And then we have no problem. If a renter is like an unpaid watcher, then it makes total sense, the brisa as it read. An unpaid watcher is not liable for theft. And so when you claim theft, you're going to be able to swear and avoid having to pay. And if the guy decides to pay anyway so that he avoids the oath, well, then he'll get paid the double payment if they catch the thief. So that's one possibility. There's another viewpoint that says that it's Rabba Baravua who says that we've got the views of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir confused. Rabbi Meir's the one who says that a renter is like a shomer sachar, and it's Rabbi Yehuda who says he's like a shomer chinam. And so as a result, it goes like Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's like a shomer chinam, and a shomer chinam is not liable for ordinary theft. And so that's the situation. And Rabbi Zera offers a third answer. Rabbi Zera Amar Hakabamayaskin, and here's what we're talking about. Betoen tinus listim mizuyan, venimsim listim she'ena mizuyan. Well, I can tell you a very simple case. Here's the situation. We have it. We're talking about again. We're going to go according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to the first viewpoint. So again, Rabbi Yehuda says that that the person who is a renter is like a paid watcher who's liable for theft. But what do I claim? I rented it from Stan. I rented the gold watch from Stan, and I say, you know what? Armed bandits came and took it from me, Stan. So I'm sorry, but I'm not liable. But you know what? Even though I'm not liable, I'm going to pay you anyway. And now, what was it? It turns out that I lied about the fact that it was I lied about the fact that it was stolen by armed bandits. It turns out that it was stolen by unarmed bandits. And so as a result, if I had admitted that, I would have had to pay you anyway. But I paid you. So we're fine. So we're whole. But I paid you. And so as a result, when it turns out that the bandits were unarmed, well, now what kind of liability is associated with that? Unarmed bandits need to pay double. And so as a result, that's why I need to, that's why I get paid the double. And so as a result, according to this, the Bryce is totally consistent because it turns out that the bandits were a ganav in the first place. So even though an armed bandit would not be considered a ganav, would be considered a gazlan, or at least could be considered a gazlan. So we don't have a proof to one way or the other with respect to Rav Yosef's position that armed bandits are considered ganavim. So with that, we're going to conclude, and we're going to now, that brings us back to the discussion of our Mishnah. And in our Mishnah, again, we dealt with an animal that fell into a garden, and we said that the owner was liable for the benefit. Now, when we learned the Mishnah, I explained that this was talking about the animal eating food. But we're going to see that that is not the only interpretation of the Mishnah. Maybe the liability is associated with the benefit of the fact that it landed on your very nice, soft bananas. And because it landed on the bananas, the animal wasn't harmed. And so as a result, that's the benefit that I need to pay you for. So, but for, in order to see that interpretation and for more on that discussion, please stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. And I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. Have a wonderful weekend.
Shabbat Shalom. Yasher Koach. Disappointing Gemara. We don't come to conclusions.
Yes, we don't come to conclusions. It's not a tough aspect of the Gemara, but also a wonderful aspect of the Gemara because it's much more like real life. That we don't know. Often these the debates that we have, we don't have. There's no right answer. There's only different possibilities.
He's giving a shear tomorrow.
Yes. Don't miss the Siyum tomorrow after the Beit Aaron Tefillah. Around is that going to be around noon or around to 11:30? What time do you
Probably
think?
Closer to 11:30.
All right, so around 11:30. Looking
It's
forward.
a fairly short Torah reading tomorrow.
Yes, it's a short read. No, do you know? Do they usually meet in the lower level Beit Midrash, or do they meet?
Usually the lower level.
All right, so it'll probably be on the lower level of Beit Midrash. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Looking forward to continuing our work and learning together next week.
Right. Yasher Koach. Shabbat Shalom.
Bye-bye. Shabbat Shalom.
Be interesting.